Good morning to you out there. It is 7 a.m. right now. It is Saturday, July 12th, and here I am with another edition of a Joe's Book Review for you. I've been very happy that over the last week or two I've been able to knock out 5 of these that were in a pile on my desk next to me, like right here, of just saying, I've read this, I'd like to do a review of it and let you know about it. I've been making some progress. I've been actually, completing open projects. Kind of like that to-do list you like to cross things off. After I complete this one for you today, I only have 2 more left in the read but not spoken about, and they're both Dresden Files. It's going to take a while to get my notes together because I think I read one of them like 2 months ago, and one of them just a month after that, so I got to refresh my own memory on what it is, but I will be back here. I'm happy I'm seeing like the surface of my desk again a little bit better than it was before. No pile of clutter and everything else. So, hey, we all make our strides as best we can to live and get on in this world. This was my cross that I made myself to bear. So be it. But making progress and I'm liking it. All that aside, let's now talk about the latest edition. This is Here Comes the Sun. It's written by Justin M. Woodward. It's another one of those splatter western novels that comes out of Death's Head Press, a division of Dead Sky Publishing. And let me start out by saying that this novel here is a different type of splatter western than most others that have come out that I've read. Okay, this is almost closer to the style of Starving Zoe or The Devoured and the Dead. Again, 2 reviews, I'll throw the links down below. And quick recap of those. In Starving Zoe, which gets high marks from me, by the way, it follows a kid from Boston, and it becomes outlaw-ish, and he lives on the streets, and he rescues and eventually marries this girl Zoe, who also is a street girl. And then she's killed, and we kind of spend the rest of the book with her sort of zombified, brought back to life demon corpse that haunts and hunts our protagonist. And aside from his backstory, he doesn't shoot his way out or tend to murder people or have gunfights, etc. It's more of the survivor horror without the fights, so to speak. Very good novel. And The Devoured and the Dead, that one deals more with a survive the elements of the snow and winter up in the mountains as people were traveling from point A to point B, and they kind of break down. You get a mix of cannibal survival. It's people versus people, but again, not with the bang bang shoot 'em up type of thing that westerns are popular for. It's subdued in that respect, because it's not man versus man with guns, and it's not man versus monster per se, so it's just a slightly different story. And Here Comes the Sun does some of that. It's not a gunfighter story as much as a monster-esque story that takes place in the backdrop of the old Wild West. So, again, every story deserves to be written, every movie deserves to be made. So, generally, when I've read all the splatter westerns so far, I have a pattern of how I go about it. I don't read up on the story to find out what it's about before I open the first page. I know I'm going to read it. I've already bought it. It's on my shelf. So it's I'm going to read it and let the story tell me what it's about. Take me on your journey so I can follow you as it's going. I don't even read the back cover description of the books before I read them. Because it's not one of these things where I'm in the middle of the bookstore deciding to buy it and get into it. I already know I want to get into the genre to a certain extent. I'm going to buy them all. And I did. I actually, besides finding some good deals on eBay, which is where I originally found out about the genre, I think I had used reward points on my credit card and bought the whole series. So it didn't cost me an extra dime out of my pocket to pick these up. Which is always a nice way to purchase things if you get the chance. But now that I've read the book, and I know what it's about, I know the beginning, middle, and end, I turned to the back cover to see what the hook was that they try to put on the back cover. And it reads, "There have been talk of monsters around the small, quiet town of Fort Whipple for some time before the evening of the brutal massacre. First, it was the livestock. Dead, shriveled bodies lined the fields, drained of their blood. But when human bodies began falling from the sky, a dark protector of sorts is dispatched to minimize the... One more time. A dark protector of sorts is dispatched to minimize the casualties." Funny thing, by the way, that little fumble I just did, when I'm here, when I'm here in my recording booth doing my audio work, I do that all the time. So after I record a book, I got to go back and then cut out digitally that fumble. But that's exactly how I do it, though. I'll fumble, gather myself, say it again. Kind of like just gut right through the whole thing and then take care of things as they do. So editing takes a while because I do tend to fumble, mumble, bumble, stumble a little bit more often than I wish. Not to mention there's always background noise that kind of happens as well. For instance, as I was talking before, my wife's new cuckoo clock, which she just had to get in Germany, was ringing the hour of 7 in the background. Were I recording, I'd have to redo that section because we don't want all that background noise. So, 2 things about reading the back cover. First of all, I'm surprised that in the actual text, they don't capitalize the name of the town, Fort Whipple. That's usually a very common thing to do, kind of standard. Surprised they didn't do it there. Secondly, there's mention in that small paragraph of shriveled bodies and drained of blood. Usually the benchmark, a tell-all that there's going to be a vampire story. You generally don't get desiccated bodies without it, unless you're talking about spiders, which could also be an interesting story if someone were to go around and write that one. But that aside, even reading the title, Here Comes the Sun. So firstly, I had to get the soft guitar riff out of my head because of the intro to the Beatles song, Here Comes the Sun. Lovely little tune of the 60s or whatever else, but first thing when I hear Here Comes the Sun, I think the song. And if I just happen right now to have put that song into your head, then I've done what I set out to do. Oh, there it is again. Someone's upstairs running water. I can hear it through the pipes. Were I recording and I have to pause, wait for it to finish, and then redo it. Secondly, with the title, Here Comes the Sun, my mind, just natural thought progression, went to vampires. And the cover doesn't really give that away. Here you've got like a black man walking in the fore towards like the camera, so to speak. There's silhouettes in the background of various animals and people and whatnot. And then there's dark bodies in the air, which is going to symbolize the falling bodies. But it's interesting because there's a couple of these, like this one here looks like he's taking a dive. And with my initial thoughts, that I thought was a swan dive. But in reality, I think the body's actually falling back first. So I didn't put much credence to what the dark bodies coming down were, because I didn't read the back of the book, and I don't do the research ahead of time before I read the book. I don't want spoilers myself. So there's nothing about the cover that would have screamed out vampire to me. There's no crosses, no stakes, no fangs and teeth. There's no blood even. Just a sense of dawn and the awaiting or fear of it. So that got me kind of braced to say, hey, what kind of story is this going to be? A vampire story. And by the way, all that's 100% fine. Not a problem with that whatsoever. Now, as we get into the story itself, we actually get a nice prologue to hear. A woman's alone in her home, just her and her thoughts. It's nighttime. Expectation, I think the husband's coming home shortly, and she's kind of waiting for him a little bit. And she just starts to get that little, the creepies, she starts feeling uneasy, sensing she's not alone. So she grabs a gun, goes out into the middle of the homes, got her lantern, calls out, "Who's there? Identify yourself," like anyone ever would, until she actually sees like a dark shape. And before she knows it, boom, she's attacked. And by the end of the attack, she's thrust airborne with inhuman speed and strength, and her body's released from a height to fall down to the ground. Splat. And that, my friends, is how you do a prologue. And you're in store for a lot of this to happen. It's like, someone's attacking the town, people got to realize it's going on, take action, brings it to its climax, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a paint by numbers if you're painting with blood and ichor across a whole lonely town. And the story has to be told in that way. You've got to bring the progression either real fast or real slow. That's up to you as a writer, as an author. You get the town folks involved in the weird happenings of Fort Whipple. And it also has that Jaws-esque feel to it, where you're not going to see the antagonist for a while, and it makes it more suspenseful and more gruesome. And here's the steps that Justin M. Woodward takes in this story. And just like a few other stories in this genre, you got to kind of start out at the outskirts, of the town. Be at the rim of, the victims that you can attack and murder and do whatever that no one's going to notice for a while, and then slowly work your way inwards towards the center. And that outskirts usually takes place with farms and homesteads on the borders of the town first, before it enters. Other examples in the genre that you can look at for these are The Night Silver River Run Red, Hunger on the Chisholm Trail, Red Station, Last of the Ravagers, Cruel Angels Past Sundown. It's a common thing that any story will do in any genre. You start on the edges, creates rumor and innuendo, and then work your way into the middle. And in this example, you get the farm animals sucked dry of blood. And some of them kind of even turned into vampires too, where they're just undead creatures. It's a tried and true formula. After you go from the outskirts, the next step usually, you got to have someone witness something that happens. Because that moves the story along. A witness can whip the town into action, and collate the forces to work against the antagonist. The witness can cause panic. And then as the shenanigans just continue more and more, the antagonist can pick them off one at a time. And that kind of a thing is seen more often with larger ensemble cast of characters. By having a witness, you get to have that moment later on in some stories of, no, you've got it all wrong. It's not him, it's him. Kind of a gotcha moment. And then there's also that old-fashioned, with a witness bringing the story to the masses, you get that exposition scene that can move the story along. Sometimes you have a person that reminisces, "Oh, I seem to vaguely recall something about that. My granddaddy once said," followed by some extremely detailed account of a similar event, barely remembered, from God knows how long ago, that was told once in a side story that this person has perfect recollection of. And it might explain the action that's taken place, every now and again generally sprinkled in with a solution to the monster or the problem. Hey, maybe there's that little sword that was buried with the ancients over there, which is the only thing in the universe that can kill this type of thing. Thank God I barely remembered that, because now we know what we need, to find the lightsaber of death. Blah, 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 blah. And then as these stories go along, you get your action, your quandary, decision, climax, just the formula. Now, Where Mr. Woodward makes his presence known with this type of story in this novel is in the hero of the novel. Okay, so besides the vampire running amok in the town of Fort Whipple, we get introduced to this other vampire who's actually there to come along and stop him. So we got a vampire versus vampire kind of thing in the making. And you get the backstory of this man, Freeman by name, and you realize he's actually part of like this order, this rule of vampires, which tries to keep humans away. You know, they almost have like a pact between humans and vampires. Leave them alone, they won't hunt you to extinction. And what generally happens, which is why this story takes place, is sometimes the younger vampires get into like a blood frenzy, and they'll find a remote town and go to town until they're brought to bear, are taught the rules, and become regular ones. Sorry for the itch. But we get to see the fun in this, because the one that's causing all this havoc in the town is a more powerful vampire than our hero, Freeman, who's there to save the day. So what happens when your savior isn't enough? How will our hero save us? Tune in next time for the next episode. And on that note, my friends, I'm going to leave you here. Again, I try to do my non-spoiler as much as I possibly can as I foray, as I take my journey into this latest edition of the Splatter Westerns. I mean, it's a decently different take on your typical vampire tale, and one that you can easily breeze through its 130 pages. So as always, you be the judge. And this is a fairly recent installment in the splatter western genre. I think it only came out back in 2023. Now, as I get into the end of this video, and this is actually a pretty quick one so far, it's only at 17 minutes, I typically end here with a long diatribe on the lengths that the Death's Head Press and their editions are with their severe lack of editing in its work product. Typos, glitches, missing punctuations. These things abound in this division of Dead Sky Publishing. However, Mr. Woodward here, with Here Comes the Sun, is the first installment of this entire series that I see had none of that. A true shock to yours truly. And now that I'm so attuned to it, I'm looking for it. But I don't think I came across one instance of a bad editing when it came to the basic stuff. Either Death's Head Press began to edit their work, or Mr. Justin M. Woodward was careful enough to go back through his work and take out all the things he could find. You know, maybe on his Microsoft Word he hit the old F7 and took its notes to knock out all the extra detritus. All those blatant problems that have abounded with the other works. Kudos. Kudos on this edition. But alas, there's one small item I do briefly have to discuss. Okay. There's a scene around page 80, about midway through the book. And just to bring you in on the details of it, the hero of the story, Mr. Freeman, that second vampire, is a black man. And in 1870s America, in the old Wild West, generally around the time the Civil War was ending, sometimes not entirely a thing you want to be. Too many whites hate too many blacks. So the marauding vampire has kind of like set him up so the town would think he was the one killing all the people. Which way he can go around, suck them all dry, and walk away completely scot-free. So the posse that was kind of looking through the town comes across Mr. Freeman over a body. And they decide to take posse justice on him. And while the unfit-for-the-role sheriff tries to hold back the flood of anger and emotions, the deputy, Buck, decides to step in and take care of all this. So he unsheathes his large hunting knife and pushes back the sheriff. And then the whole mob kind of descends on Freeman. Fists, boots, weapons, they're all raining down on him. And during this, the sheriff's kind of looking, and he kind of sees a glint in Freeman's eye as he looks up. And by the way, he's not defending himself, which kind of says, I'm not the one. I didn't do this. So eventually the sheriff musters up his courage, and he has enough of it now to decide to intervene. And he raises his pistol, fires off a shot, and tries to get the mob off Freeman. And he swims through the mob to the front, and he emerges, as the book says, just in time to see Buck pull out a large hunting knife from his boot and hold it to the man's throat. So things are getting serious. And it took me a second. It's like, wait a minute. Buck and the hunting... Does he have a second large hunting knife? Because he already brandished a large hunting knife just 2 pages earlier when he started the whole thing. And now he's brandishing another large hunting knife out of his boot. So, I mean, lo and behold, that's exactly what's written here. So I have the feeling that Mr. Woodward does have a little error here. I think he because we never see that Buck sheathes the knife during the beating. And there he is pulling it out again. And this time it specifically says the boot. So I think there was something that happened here where it might have been cool to see it the first time and then cool to see it the second time. But now you're just having a guy pulling out knives from all over his body. But as I said, that is the only thing that happened in this entire book that kind of had me criticize, wait a minute, is this right? Doesn't look right. So again, kudos and well done. That's what I have for you today. I'm hitting 22 minutes about right now. I'll throw up my banner here. Love to see the clicks, love to see the subscriptions. Help me out. That'd be much appreciated if you did. Otherwise, cheers. Enjoy your weekend and stay safe. Bye-bye now. I'll see you real soon, hopefully with both Dresden Files. Take care.